It is once again time for the news here on Rwanda Television. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this latest edition. My name is Serge Nahore. As always, we'll begin with the headlines. Rwanda's government has continued with its goal to create decent jobs that provide employees with skills that allow them to remain competitive on the labor market. Rwanda's National Commission for Human Rights has emphasized the importance of respecting the rights of people living with disabilities as part of its latest report. And on the international scene, rights groups are sounding the alarm about a spike in sexual violence and forced marriage in Sudan's civil war. Now let's go straight ahead to the details. Members of the Social Democratic Party have committed to democracy and social welfare and pledged to contribute, that is, tirelessly to achieving the goals outlined in the government's 5-year plan as part of the National Strategy for Transformation, or NST2. We have the details. In a political bureau meeting of the party on Sunday, members were briefed on the government's plan to accelerate national development over the next 5 years. They expressed that the contents of NST2 align with that of PSD's agenda, which further inspired them to raise awareness of this plan among its members, as explained by the party's president, Dr. Vincent Biruta. We found that the principles align at a rate of 86.6%. It is therefore encouraging that the input of our followers is in line with the direction our country has chosen. It is therefore clear that implementing those principles will not be difficult for us, the same principles we presented to our supporters during the campaign period before the last elections. We are very happy about that and have decided to make known the contents of that program among our followers at the district level and lower levels, asking them to participate in it and play their part in its implementation, both as individuals and as members of PSD collectively in general. The party's leadership also expressed satisfaction with how this year's elections were conducted, especially the presidential and parliamentary elections. They went well in general because we participated and no one was victimized in any way during the campaign period. As for the results, they were also good because the presidential candidate we supported was elected. And as for the parliamentary elections, be it in the Chamber of Deputies or in the Senate, we are represented there as a party among those who were elected. In this PSD Political Bureau meeting, a list of new members joining the Political Bureau was approved, along with the report of the previous Political Bureau meeting. Now to the southern province, that's in Huye district, where some churches that had been closed have now been reopened. Both leaders and members of these churches are happy to be able to pray in their regular worship spaces again. Cleanliness improvements were part of the requirements, making worshippers feel safer and more comfortable compared to before. At Adeper's Tava Parish in Huye district, a wedding was the first ceremony to be held in the church after its reopening. Following 3 months of closure, the church was permitted to resume operations after meeting various sanitation standards. There was great joy for the newlyweds and for the church leadership. In Huye town, Zion Temple is another church that received permission to reopen. Members and leaders of the reopened churches agree that the cleaning tasks required were essential. Elsewhere, other churches that remain closed continue to work on their required improvements. Some have already written to Huye district authorities awaiting inspection. Huye's Vice Mayor for Social Welfare has noted that about 30% of the churches that were closed have now met the requirements and reopened. It has been approximately 3 months since certain churches and places of worship without the required facilities were closed. These requirements mainly included adequate restroom facilities, well-maintained grounds and parking, lightning rods, water storage tanks, and soundproofing to prevent noise disturbance to nearby residents. Out of 287 churches in Huye district, 195 had been closed. Now back to Kigali City, and the Gikondo wetland located where factories, garages and other buildings once stood is currently being transformed into a tourist attraction and is also being adapted to collect water runoff from surrounding hills. We have the details on that as well. In the Gikondo Rwandex wetland, pedestrian paths, artificial lakes and indigenous trees are being added. Initial cleanup efforts have removed remnants of old buildings, industrial and garage waste, and all the vegetation has been cleared with specialized machinery leveling and digging most of the area based on the project's master plan. This development is creating job opportunities for local residents, while nearby residents and passerbys also say they are benefiting from the changes. People did not really visit this area before when factories were located here. It felt like trespassing. Now, however, everything is different. Plus, we get to work here instead of sitting the entire day and doing nothing. We expect a lot from this wetland when the tourist attractions have been established, more even than the one at Nyandungu, because this one is much bigger. The work done here includes getting it ready and removing things like rocks and wild shrubs to create idyllic gardens. As local residents living near here, we are happy about this because the area has become beautiful, unlike the way it was before. It used to be impossible to cut across the wetland walking, and now whether day or night you can walk without fearing anything. The security presence is great. There is no doubt that people will be flocking here to relax and take walks when the park is ready. It will be very useful to the general public. It will be beautiful with gardens and lakes. The visitors will be able to come to a wonderful place. The Gikondo wetland is one of 5 wetlands in Kigali slated for transformation into ecotourism areas. Special trucks are constructing drainage canals to guide water runoff from surrounding hills into the wetlands. Samuel Dusengiyumva, the mayor of Kigali City, explains that these wetlands will also help manage the water runoff from the hills, but the primary goal is to develop them to make Kigali an even more attractive tourist city.
Igishanga cya Rwampara, igishanga cya Rugenge rw'Intare, igishanga cya Nyabugogo, igishanga cya Kibumba ndetse n'Gikondo.
There is the wetland of Rwampara, the one known as Rugende rw'Intare, the ones at Nyabugogo, Kibumba and Gikondo. There will be vast areas with gardens, walkways and other forms of infrastructure that can help local residents to relax. But all of that will not stop the wetlands from absorbing water from surrounding areas, mitigating the risk of floods. We should be glad that since 2020, when industrial activities vacated the marshlands, deaths caused by flooding in residential areas in Kigali have become a thing of the past. We are still dealing with the problem of landslides, but there is no doubt that the proper maintenance of those marshlands will solve the problem of flooding in places like Rugunga and Kanogo, resolving the issue of water management once and for all. The 5 wetlands undergoing development cover an area of 408 hectares. The project is expected to cost as much as $80 million, which is approximately 100 billion Rwandan francs. Rwanda has set the goal of creating decent jobs that provide employees with skills that remain competent in the labor market. This has been confirmed by the Ministry of Public Service and Labor and is appreciated by those who have found jobs thanks to increased investment in the country. At the beginning of this year, the unemployment rate dropped to below 15% due to Rwandan and foreign investments in sectors, including industry, over the past 3 years, reducing unemployment by 7%. The distribution chain of goods from industries to major supermarkets is one area where job opportunities are visible for many.
The production is very good. We are producing around 5 tons per day, and we use all the Rwandan potatoes sourced from around 1,000 farmers. The market is fantastic. It's growing every day. That's also what we can see. We are growing in Rwanda, but also outside Rwanda.
As part of the second phase of the National Strategy for Transformation NST2, the country aims to create 1.25 million new jobs over the next 5 years, reaching completion by 2029. Figures from the National Institute of Statistics indicate that as of May this year, 8.1 million Rwandans were of working age. Of these, 4.3 million were employed, but only 2.8 million of them held permanent positions. The Minister of Public Service and Labour, Ambassador Christine Ngurikinka, states that building a stable labour market is essential to ensuring more sustainable job creation.
Securing adequate and decent employment for all job seekers remains one of the biggest challenges, and this requires, first and foremost, the creation of an enabling environment for sustainable enterprises to prosper and create jobs. Given the scale and urgency of these challenges in the world of work, it is clear that confronting them is not an option, but a necessity. As we focus on achieving this high ambition, we must also turn our efforts and attentions to creating jobs that are decent, jobs that have quality, and jobs that develop our human capital with the skills for today's needs and tomorrow's employability.
Globally, the target is to create 600 million new jobs by 2030, which translates to 40 million jobs that need to be created annually. Now to the western province in Nyabihu district, where there are 22 cooperatives of potato farmers who have now reached the level of supplying their produce to various markets across the country. These farmers say that government efforts to promote agricultural policies have enabled them to farm professionally. Across Nyabihu, terraces are being constructed to help residents improve their farming, especially potato cultivation. Farmers see this as a solution to increasing their crop yields. These farmers say they are not only producing enough to meet their food needs, but are also selling potatoes at markets throughout the country, a significant factor in reducing poverty in their own households. Nyabihu district has 22 cooperatives farming potatoes on over 10,000 hectares of land. Of these, 18 cooperatives gather the produce for distribution nationwide. Additionally, there are 94 potato seed producers in the district, providing farmers with access to high-quality seeds close to home. To expand potato farming, Nyabihu district has allocated over 400 hectares of land to be dedicated to potato cultivation during this fiscal year. Now, as we noted in the headlines, Rwanda's National Commission for Human Rights this week released a report on the respect of human rights in Rwanda, and part of the report focused on the right to well-being, health, education, among others, for people living with disabilities. William Evans Mutabazi has the details on that report.
In the recent annual activity report of the year 2023-2024, Rwanda National Commission for Human Rights monitored the respect of human rights for persons with disabilities living in their respective families, focusing on the right to well-being, health and education, right to be registered in civil registers, and the right not to be subjected to torture and other cruel and degrading treatment. The Commission concluded that the above-mentioned rights are generally respected in Rwanda.
The inspection, we went on field to see how the life or the rights of people with disability living in their families. It shows that people, most of them, those who are living in their families, they are treated well, but we're still having an issue of course, a lack of means and resources for families having people with disability. Especially, we focus on children with disability, on right of education, right to life, right to health, and so we saw that many children still who need special needs for education, even for health. We still have a lot to do. We call upon institutions that are concerned to take some measures that to improve the life and the rights of that category of people with disability. We highlight that in our reports, and we gave recommendations to concerned institutions.
Although the Commission's report says that there are still some challenges that threaten the rights of people with disabilities that are not taken care of by the families they live in, majorly because of low income and poverty, Councilor Louise Mukashema thinks it's equally important that special law reforms are introduced relating to legal proceedings, especially for people living with disabilities.
Kuvuga ngo iyo tuvuze umwihariko kuko kira ni icyiciro cyihariye yari icyiciro cyihariye rero n'amategeko agomba kuba yihariye.
Because this is a special category, therefore it calls for special laws. For example, if the person is deaf, blind and not knowing the official language, in this case it is important that the law reforms cover such incidents to protect their right to justice. The provisions of the law should be amended to accommodate all this so they are fully aware of what is happening and also best defend themselves. But also in general, much effort is needed in sensitizing the public about their rights as a way of safeguarding them from crime and protecting against human rights violations.
kugira ngo birinde ibyaha ariko no kugira ngo niba uburenganzira bwabo buhungabanya babashe kubuharanira.
Among 573 examined complaints in the year 2023-2024, 432 complaints, making 75.4%, were resolved. 68, making 11.8%, were submitted to relevant institutions to solve them, but have not yet been solved. Yet, 73, making 12.7%, were still being investigated. William Evans, Mtawazi, RTV News.
Welcome back, and now the international news. Rights groups are sounding the alarm about a spike in sexual violence and forced marriage in Sudan's civil war. We have the details courtesy of VOA.
Noor al-Huda Afif al-Din fled Khartoum, Sudan around June this year. When the fighting started in April 2023, she decided at first to weather it out in the capital city. But her life with her husband and baby soon began to fall apart.
We had no electricity, and we were sitting in darkness when my sister switched on the flashlight on her cell phone. That's when they started shooting at us. Literally, the facade of our home broke into pieces.
But getting caught in the crossfire was not the only danger she encountered. She also became a victim of an attempted forced marriage. The son of a commander in the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, one of the warring parties that has occupied Khartoum for most of the war, began visiting her at her home and insisting they get married. Her husband went missing one day and she later learned was imprisoned by the RSF. He has since been released.
The commander's son even dared to suggest that since my husband was missing, he should be declared dead, and implied he might be involved in his disappearance. I told him I'm married.
Despite her protest, she was taken away from her family and forced to live in the house of the RSF commander, who also tried to force her into marrying his son. She says she was subjected to emotional and physical abuse at the house. Rights groups say countless women have become victims of forced marriage and other forms of sexual violence in Sudan's war.
So we documented cases of rape, of gang rape. A lot of the rape by the RSF was happening in the context of people's homes, in front of relatives.
Al-Din says other women living in the commander's house felt sympathy for her and helped her escape one night through a gap in a wire fence. With her baby and mother, she made her way to the relative safety of Port Sudan, where she now lives in this tiny apartment. She says her own trauma has spurred her to help others who have suffered similar experiences.
We decided to go to camps for the displaced and check on people who had problems in Khartoum. So I found people who suffered from the death of their parents, brothers, also women who are raped.
Sudan's war has also seen the rape of children as young as 8, according to analysts and media reports. Henry Wilkins, VOA News, Port Sudan, Sudan.
North Carolina is one of 7 so-called swing states that could determine the next U.S. president. Kamala Harris, Donald Trump and their surrogates have spent a lot of time campaigning in this southern state. Black Americans make up 22% of the population, and those voters could decide who gets North Carolina's 16 electoral college votes. VOA once more.
In the days leading up to Election Day, former Democratic President Barack Obama came to North Carolina to campaign for Democratic candidate Kamala Harris. He won this state in 2008 and wants to ensure it goes to Harris this election cycle.
I'm here for a very important reason, and that is to ask you to vote. For your next governor, Josh Stein, and for the next president of the United States of America, Kamala Harris.
Charlotte, North Carolina's largest city, has favored Democratic candidates in the last 5 presidential elections. More than 1/3 of the city's residents are African American, but they're not all interested in the same things as they prepare to vote.
My main issues are, of course, like the rights of women to have jurisdiction over their own bodies, rights pertaining to sexuality, LGBTQIA populations, as well as just people's rights in general. I think like some concerning things for me always, of course, like as African American women are the way that my people's rights are protected.
Making sure that underclass is also taken care of. You know, there's a lot going on where you want to raise taxes and, you know, you want to make sure different police officers are not getting, you know, penalized for what they're doing to African American young men, and it's not fair.
What's very important, the cost of living is very important to me. Just the way we live, you know, making it more affordable for us Americans.
At the Democratic Party office of Mecklenburg County, located in Charlotte, staff told VOA that as of October 24th, about 31% of African American voters had already cast their ballots. According to Leah Smart, senior organizer with the Mecklenburg County Democratic Party, she has spoken with Black voters who have voted for both candidates.
Some people feel that their vote is taken for granted and it's not appreciated. They want the way that they think it should be. They're not sought after the way they think it should be. And I know a lot of our work here in MEC is trying to fix that.
The Charlotte Republican Party office declined VOA's request for an interview. But Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance was recently here with an appeal to Black Christians.
In some ways, this election is fundamentally about whether Christians are going to be allowed to live our faith, whether Christians are going to be allowed to advocate for our principles, and whether Christians are going to be able to raise our children and build communities that are consistent with our values.
Getting Black voters to vote Republican has been historically difficult. Trump won only 8% of the Black vote in 2020, but some polls show him making gains. And the religious message resonates with some Black voters in North Carolina, who overwhelmingly identify as Protestant or evangelical Christians.
Just the nature of the people in North Carolina. It's always been as far as a Bible Belt. He goes by the Bible in a lot of ways as far as the beliefs of the Bible.
Obama, in turn, when speaking in Charlotte, emphasized that no president can fully eradicate racism or solve all problems. But politics, depending on whom people choose, can make lives better or worse. For Rafael Saakov in Charlotte, North Carolina, Anna Rice, VOA News.
Now, before we go, another look at the headlines. Rwanda's government has continued with its goal to create decent jobs that provide employees with skills that allow them to remain competitive in the labor market. Rwanda's National Commission for Human Rights has emphasized the importance of respecting the rights of people living with disabilities as part of a report it has released. And on the international scene, rights groups are sounding the alarm about a spike in sexual violence and forced marriage in Sudan's civil war. As always, we thank you for joining us for this edition, and we hope that the week ahead will be great for you. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.